Drink beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. In this video I'll be covering the topic of brewing shared recipes from a variety of different sources, with some pointers to actually brewing the intended beer and getting good results. I have made this video as it is clear that many homebrewers are actually not aware of some or all of this key information. So I hope that this puts you on track or simply confirms that you have everything in place already. Let me start with a really good suggestion that you only use recipes from known sources. This could be recipes from books, breweries, or people with some form of track history, or preferably some professional qualifications. Do keep in mind that some key authors in beer brewing are not actually qualified brewers, but have more than proved their credibility. I would certainly avoid recipes that are shared online with little information. Recipes shared on the cloud within certain brewing software are a great example of this. They may well have a very cool nickname, like BeerGod 2019, but this really means nothing, as if the experience and credibility of the recipe writer is unknown, then as such you could be brewing something that is well below par, and as such a total waste of your time and money. Thankfully there are a large amount of credible sources out there, so there really is no need or reason to brew a risk recipe. My next suggestion is always to add the recipe into an accurate brew calculator. This way you can be more sure about the end result of what you are brewing, also using various methods that I will be covering shortly. Also, you will notice that certain recipes contain more information than others. We will look at this also. Here is one example that I will now walk through. This recipe is shared on the Beer and Brewing website. This is for a white rabbit brown ale. Interesting name for sure. One nice thing about this recipe is that it gives information in both metric and imperial. So to start with, I will fire up my brewing software. I am using Brewfather here, but it will be easy for you to follow this if you are using brewing software that you're familiar with. So here we are now in Brewfather, and on the left hand side of the screen I will show relevant information from the recipe. The first thing to do now is to set the volume, which we can see here is 19 litres. In Brewfather this is done in the equipment profile. Even if we intend to brew a different amount, then still just enter this amount for now. You will find that some American recipe sources will not mention the volume and just assume that everything homebrew is 19 litres or 5 US gallons, so keep this in mind. The other figure to enter now is the brewhouse efficiency figure that the recipe is using. Be sure to not confuse brewhouse efficiency with mash efficiency. They are two very different things. We will come back to this a little bit later. The next steps are to add in the different grain in the recipe, also the yeast and the mash schedule. I've done that here already. There is no mash out featured in this recipe, but I always perform one and suggest you do the same for the sake of the sparge. We can now check our numbers to make sure everything fits. I will put our specific recipe details in this handed space here for reference. Naturally there are different grain types sold in different countries, and sometimes you will need to find a substitute. I would suggest either looking online or better still consult with your homebrew store for advice on this. If your recipe does not have the volume amount, then generally you will have gravity figures as shown here in this recipe, and then you can play with the numbers till things work out. In this example our brewing software is spot on with an original gravity of 1.058. So that certainly works. However, I do notice that the brewing software is showing a figure that's a little bit concerning for the final gravity. This is actually something you will see with all software, and this is because your yeast attenuation rate is hardly ever a number, but a number range. Brewing software will always use just a single number. So let's check this firstly by going to the website for the yeast manufacturer, and we can see here that the range of 71 to 75% attenuation is what is expected. Going back to our software now, we can see that a figure of 72% attenuation has been used, so we can certainly adjust this. The other thing that could be doing this is our substitute grain here. Please do keep in mind that all your original recipe is doing is giving you an estimation. Our brewing software is doing exactly the same, so as long as your numbers are not a long way out, then stress not. The next thing to look at is the colour suggested by the recipe. This will usually be shown as EBC or SRM. This recipe did not give us this information, but we do know that it is a brown ale, which is enough to go on. Most recipe software will show you the actual colour of your recipe like you can see here, and a score figure as shown here. As you can already see, we have a nice brown colour, but there will clearly be work to do if it was showing as black, blonde or something in between. The easy route to change this is to look at the grain with the highest EBC or SRM, which here is our chocolate malt in this recipe, and you will start tweaking this either up for darker results or down for lighter results. Now this is all straight, let us now look at the hop additions for the recipe. You will note that in this recipe there are specific amounts of hops quoted with a specific AA percentage. Chances are that the hops you will buy will be different. Let me show you how to match things up here. Start off by simply adding in the hops as quoted in the recipe. Here is that first hop entered, and you can see that this gives an IBU score for this hop addition of 11.9. This IBU score is the key. If your hops of this type have a different alpha acid percentage, then you will need to make changes. In this next example, you can see that we have a different amount of hops needed to reach the desired 11.9 IBU because we have a different alpha acid percentage. Our original percentage was 4, but our hops are actually 4.3%. So in this case, the original 28 grams have been reduced down to 26 grams to match the desired IBU. You will now need to do this for the rest of your hop additions. Some will argue that this is only necessary to do for hops that are present in the boil, because dry hops do not give an actual IBU and just a perceived bitterness, and others will adjust all hops in this way. I suggest that you do your own testing and make your own choices here based on your own experiences and not the experiences of others with different taste palates. With all of our hops now entered with the desired IBU, you should find that your IBU in your recipe calculator is either close or matches the IBU in the original recipe. It must be pointed out though that this is not an exact science, and as such different recipe calculators can use slightly different formulas. By matching the individual hops in IBU, we have done the important work here. So the very next things to do is now to make your own personal adjustments. The first of these is your own individual brewhouse efficiency, which you will see I have adjusted here to 75%, being the average for the Grainfather brewing system used in this example. And once you have adjusted this, you can then convert the recipe into a batch size that you wish to brew. I have taken this from 19 litres to 23 litres. You are now brewing the intended recipe that meets your needs. This now brings this video to a close. If you have any questions, then please let me know via YouTube or Facebook. I do hope that you found this video to be useful, interesting and enjoyable. If appropriate, then please like this video on YouTube, and if you've not done so already, then please subscribe. I regularly post new content. Happy brewing!